We're live. We're going live. We're live for another Tech Talks. Our camera in the room is not working, so we're on a laptop at a weird angle. But it'll be fine.
It's a good angle.
This is a really weird angle.
There.
Very intimate, informal.
It'll be fine.
We've got this.
Okay, we wanted to continue our discussion of group projects.
Absolutely.
Today, spending some time specifically in Canvas, how you can use some of the tools and settings in Canvas to facilitate group work, and then also showing an example assignment where we're trying to integrate some of those best practices of group project design into the assignment design itself. And Melanie has been hard at work on designing this and
I think
mastering all the ins and outs. I think we all have, but mostly you.
this has been a good joint effort here. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And yeah, so Caleb, as you just mentioned, we're gonna try to do at least two things here today. We want to talk about how to use Canvas to establish groups and to set up group work. And then we also want to kind of take it a little bit step further and just talk about group assignment design. So to begin with, I'm going to just kind of go through the Canvas steps of what we do to set up groups in Canvas. And the first thing is to actually build groups. We're going to go through the people link. So I'm going to click here on people. And it's going to show the people in this course. Having a little bit of funny response here on my mouse. A little bit of a delay, but it's acting a little crazy, so I'll do our best here.
One of those days.
I know, I take my hand away and it's still moving.
Oh, weird.
I'll just look at my own screen instead of up there. That will help.
There you go.
Okay, so right now, this is showing everyone. So this is everyone in this course. And there's two other tabs here, and these are other example groups I've set up. And so as you set up groups in your course, you can find all your groups along these different tabs. If you have not set up any groups, you won't see these extra tabs up here. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a new group for this example. So to do that, I'm going to go to group set. And then let's take a look at the options we have. So the first thing is I'm going to create a name for the group set. I'm going to create a name that's aligned with the assignment that I'm going to connect it to. So the assignment is broadly about evaluating different locations, evaluating the geology at different locations. To decide where would be the best place to build a structure. So I'm going to call this site evaluation. Okay.
And so I do want to take a moment because we've been talking about like structure and transparency, like building this stuff in Canvas is going to let you to do a lot of different things in the group. But just right off the bat, like having something as simple as a title on your group, if you're building in Canvas, can help students navigate, especially if there's a bunch of different group projects they might be working on.
Yeah, well, and also, I don't know if you were going to get into this, but once you have groups set up, students see they have a whole group button in their nav bar. And within that, they can see all the groups that they are enrolled in every course. And if all those groups have very generic names like group 1, group 2, it's not descriptive and they really don't have any context for which course it even belongs to. So giving it some kind of descriptive name is important in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can take a look at that if there's time.
Oh, awesome.
All right, so I have my group set name and then I've got some options. I can click this and allow self sign up. If I were to do that, that would allow students to add themselves to the group that they want to be in. They can move from one group to another. And I could establish, there's a limit to how many students I'd want in a group or how many groups I want that would then determine how many students per group. So that's one way to set up a group. If I don't allow self sign up, then I can go ahead and create the group structure and be more intentional about what students are going in what groups. And so I can split students by number of groups. So in this case, I would decide how many groups I want. So say I want 5 groups, then however many number of students are in the course would be divided evenly as possible among the number of groups I set. I can also split groups by number of students per group. So if I want 4 students per group, for example, I can set it that way.
Seems like, sorry, I just want to take a moment just because it seems like right here is one of the biggest, or it's a large decision that you have to make before you start designing these groups, right? Like do I have enough roles to fit the number of students I want per group? Or like, is it a group assignment that doesn't require specific roles? So can I be a little bit more free form? Or do I have enough structure in my course to actually allow students to self-assign into a group? And is there going to be any issues with that? Like maybe Nick and Melanie work on group projects all the time. Is that going to hurt them or like misalign to some outcome in my course where I need multiple interactions with multiple different like stakeholders in a simulated environment or case study or something? So just right here, take a moment to really think about it if you are designing something with group structures. Because yeah, this is going to be the first like pinch point. If you set this up incorrectly, it might actually become an issue later on when you're actually getting assignments from students or fielding their questions. Sorry.
Yeah,
I just
no,
wanna
that's
do
a
an
good
aside
point.
there
Yeah.
while we're kind of in here.
It's a great point. Another thing you can do is if you know you want this to be a group assignment, but you haven't quite worked through all those details yet,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can simply set up the group set and then create the number of groups in it later.
Perfect. Now give you the most like freedom.
And
Gotcha.
that would probably be a good idea if you're doing this in a sandbox course or template course and then
Mhm.
copying it over and you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know how many students are enrolled in the class yet.
Yep.
You can wait, you can have all the structure built and then determine number of groups and who's in each group once the class gets started.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then another option we have here is leadership. And so this is kind of a strange one. So I can click this and automatically assign a student group leader. I don't think I'd recommend this across the board. I think maybe in very specific circumstances. So what happens is if I were to assign somebody as a group leader, and I can do it automatically or I can do it later intentionally. But if you assign somebody as a group leader, it means that they can edit the group name, but also manage the membership in the group so they can kind of move students in or out of their group. And so maybe that's not necessarily something that we want to have. for all
Yeah,
our
we were trying to
students.
figure out what would be a use case for that, and I suppose it would make sense if you were in a situation where you had a huge class and maybe you had a bunch of TAs. And the
managing.
TAs were becoming group leaders to manage individual groups, but that's not usually the situation at CCS courses, so. Probably not a tool you would likely use here.
Yeah, and could actually create some ambiguity like, oh, Caleb's a group leader. What does that mean?
Right.
Like if
Well,
they
and-
can kind of like dive into
And you
there.
wouldn't want a student accidentally or intentionally kicking people out of their group and adding people without their knowledge, and
Mhm.
unless you have a good use case for it, I probably wouldn't touch it.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna go ahead and hit save and create this group set. So I'm getting this notification, maybe, oh, okay, it did it, great. So I have, one, well, here's my group set called site evaluation. I've got a group in it, and it has put 4 students into this group site evaluation 1.
Mhm.
I can also add another group. Call that group site evaluation.
So maybe if
2.
you need to like split that group up, maybe a group has too many versus another, you can kind of do that
Yes,
piecemeal.
Exactly
Okay.
right. And so, yeah, once you've got your group set, they don't have to be permanent. So I can drag and drop and move people here. Take Nick and move him down to another
Hey, I
group.
liked my group.
I can also move people around by clicking on the vertical ellipses, and I can move them, remove them, set as group leaders. So once you have those groups set, you've got some flexibility with what you can do in there. I can also edit my groups by clicking the 3 vertical dots up here. I can edit the group name. I can edit those group settings that we just set. And then if I really like the way my groups are set up for this one assignment and I want to do another group assignment with similar group setup, I can clone this group set and create another one.
Okay.
All right.
And so just to recap, because I always get confused here. So you've created a group set and that's what you see at the top.
Mhm.
So that would link to a specific assignment and a specific project that might have multiple assignments in it. But then within that group set are the actual assigned groups. So it's like nested. Here's your group set, aligns with a project,
Mhm.
and then here are the individual groups. This is where you're actually putting the students. Is that the way to think about it?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. And so you can always kind of browse back through and see what your other group sets and groupings are for the groups that may link to other assignments or may be
Gotcha.
related to other assignments. And then, of course, we have this tab. We can just go back to everyone in the class. Okay.
Gotcha.
So we've created our group set, we've created our groups. So now let's take a look at how we would attach those groups to an assignment. And so I don't want to get into the assignment details necessarily yet, because I think we'll talk about that in a minute, but broadly,
Mhm.
we built a group assignment here that has two parts. So the first part is set up as a discussion, and then the next part is set up as an assignment. And so we built this so that it's the same groups of students who work together on both parts. It's so one big continuous group assignment with two parts. So I'm going to go into this first part, which is a discussion. And I want to now signify that this is a group assignment. I need to tell Canvas that. So I'm going to go into the more options, the vertical ellipses, and I'm going to go to edit. And it's going to give me all my options again. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click, this is a group discussion. So now I can choose my group set. So this is where I set up those group sets. So I'm going to choose site evaluation, and it tells Canvas that these are the groups that we just built. They're going to go along with this discussion. If I hadn't already built the group structure earlier on, I could click new group category and I could build it from scratch here.
Oh, gotcha. So again, in a
Another way
pinch,
to get
if you
there.
needed to, oh, whoops, I didn't make those group sets, I can do it right there.
Yep.
Awesome.
Exactly. And so then I'm going to click save. So what happens is once I've done that now, when students come into this discussion, they will only see the discussion or the posts related or posted by students in their individual groups. They will not see
Mhm.
the discussions from the other groups.
Hmm.
As an instructor, if I want to come in here and participate and read the responses, I can toggle between the different groups or among the different groups by clicking here. So if I click this icon that has sort of the two figures on it at the top left, it shows me, and if I had, say, 5 groups, I'd see a list of all the groups, and now I can toggle back and forth and get to the discussion just for those specific groups.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna move out of this. And I'm gonna go back to modules.
Oh, and there's something really important that I think you just did there. Just to note is when you're in those individual group discussions, sometimes it can be kind of hard to get back to the course.
Yeah.
Just follow the breadcrumbs at the top, clicking through those links. That seems to be the easiest way.
Mhm.
And then you can kind of navigate between the different discussions. But if you get kind of stuck in that group space, that's usually your way out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep, if I'm in group 1, you can see that I've got to follow this path to get back out.
Yeah.
And then here I am back into the broader course page and in my modules. So I'm going to go into the second part now, which is an assignment. And I'm going to attach the group designation to the assignment as well. So I'm going to go through edit. And I'm going to scroll down to my options. Once again, I'm going to say that this is a group assignment. And I'm going to choose that same group category because I want all those same groups of students to continue to work together. And then here I have one other option. I can assign grades to each student individually or as a group. And right now, as it's set, grades will be assigned as a group.
Mhm.
So when I go into SpeedGrader, I will see only the group designations in SpeedGrader. I will not see the individual student names.
So it'll just say the group name, site evaluation 1, site evaluation 2.
Yes,
Okay.
and we can look at that. If I were to click the box that would say assign students individually, when I go into SpeedGrader, I'll still see each student's name. So here I'm in SpeedGrader and I see site evaluation 1, 2,
Gotcha.
and so on. No one has submitted anything, so they're not clickable, but or they're not.
But if the group submitted something and you give it a grade, then all the students in that group get the same grade and the same written feedback provided.
Yes, and here SpeedGrader is telling us any comment I put in here are sent to the
Okay.
entire group.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
If I had checked the box to allow individual grading, I would have a choice in my comments if I wanted to send comments to the whole group or just to a specific
Oh,
individual.
okay. Interesting.
And in both of those instances, the group is only doing one submission, right?
Correct.
No matter what, regardless of whether you're grading individually or grading as a group, Caleb submits it.
It's
Everybody
visible
gets
for
that
all
submission.
people in the group.
Great
Okay.
point. Okay. So that's the sort of how to in Canvas part. How do you create groups? How do you attach them to an assignment? What does that look like for the students and instructors? I think should we kind of talk about the actual
Yeah.
assignment? So
Yeah, I think are we doing
We
good?
got about 10
we've
minutes.
got a long
Awesome.
time. So
Perfect.
we've built an assignment that we think aligns pretty well with, or at least provides avenues for discussion related to the 4 aspects we talked about last week related to what we think makes successful discussion.
Mhm.
So structure and support, transparency, authenticity, and
Accountability.
thank you,
Yes.
accountability. Okay. So the way this particular assignment is structured, again, we're not saying everyone should make their assignments look like this. This is just one example. So we've got 2 parts, and the first part is, this would be, for example, an introductory geology course. And we've got students working together in groups of 4. The overall goal is that they're going to determine where they should build a new their community college. So each student in the group would be tasked with choosing a location, and they'll evaluate the geology at each location. So each of these accordions will have the data sets required for each student to evaluate certain aspects of the geology at each location. Once they've done that, then they would come back to the discussion board here, and they would post their summaries, their topographic profiles, and their general assessments, and have a conversation based on that. Then part 2 of the assignment, we can come back and dig into the details of all this, but then part 2 of the assignment is that the group would work together to come to a consensus on which location they think is the most ideal for building the new branch of their community college. And then they would put together some form of a presentation or report, and they would submit it then to this assignment location here. And so that was part 2. So what do you guys think? Should we kind of talk through the different pieces of what we think makes successful
Yeah.
assignments, and
Should
then
we-
how this relates to that?
Yeah, should we go back to the first part of the assignment and then kind of break it up a little bit?
Let's do it.
Structure it
Absolutely.
somewhat.
I will say like immediately, like not going sequentially through, but what immediately comes to mind when I see this is also a best practice of like the discussion board. Everybody has their own piece of the puzzle that is unique and distinct. They're all being assessed on the same thing, that the analysis of this data, but they're kind of doing the legwork for the rest of the group. So everybody's coming to the table with something that, you know, if Nick had to do all 4 of these things, it would be just too much, but
Right.
it's kind of broken up in a natural way. Everybody gets practice doing it, but then we also get practice as a group and analyzing a larger data set.
Yeah.
Like bringing that all together just feels very, authentic. It feels like it is a natural way of working. So it again, it's aligning with a lot of those best practices.
Yeah, but that's often how we work as a team. Is we have some project like a tech talk, and then we break it out and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this piece of it. You're going to focus on this piece. You're going to focus on this piece. And then next week we bring it all together as a cohesive product. And Melanie, you were saying that for a geology class, this is also a pretty authentic example of how a real site evaluation in the industry, kind of an authentic version of how that occurs, right?
Yeah, I think, geologists, they would look at maps, they would look at topography, they would look at flood hazard, they want to consider soil properties, slope failure potential. Yeah, so they would look at data sets and try to pull together a big picture.
And that's usually not just one individual working by themselves. It's often
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
industry geologists will frequently work in
Mhm.
teams, yep.
Mhm.
And so kind of what you guys were saying pointed out accountability in this
Mhm.
assignment, right? Each student has their own piece of the assignment to work on.
Yep.
Authenticity.
Mhm.
Transparency, I think, is built into the way that, we're trying to be really clear about how this is aligning with outcomes.
and you're using a tilt framework for it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think you were about to say something. I feel like I cut you off.
Well, on that accountability element, also, it's like everybody's got a role, and at least in this case, the roles are equal. So it's doesn't need to be an equitable role, but an equal role. Everybody's doing the exact same thing, and so it's not like, well, Caleb did all of the research on this part of the project, and
right.
it's like this huge thing, and now Caleb's, there's a weird tension in the group because Caleb did all the research, but
Yeah.
now he's like, well, I did everything. I don't want to do the presentation part.
Yeah.
Like there isn't that weird like
Yep.
negotiation of load or role
Yeah.
here, because everybody's doing the same thing. Everyone's building the same background information to be able as a group to be successful later in the presentation.
Yeah.
Like I love the way you set this up.
The distribution of labor is transparent and built
There you go.
into the assignment structure
It's
itself.
all just weave
They don't
together.
have to negotiate that distribution at this stage of the project.
That's right.
Later on, though, they do. But I think that's a valuable skill and a valuable part of an authentic group project is negotiating that distribution of labor
when it's appropriate.
when it's appropriate. But in this case, you're scaffolding in it, and the first stage, that's not needed. And I
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, and so you mentioned scaffolding, and so I think that also, we kind of didn't really talk too much about the structure and the support side of this, and so, yeah, we tried to implement scaffolding and clear structure by giving suggestions to students about when certain parts of this discussion should be completed. So by Monday, students should have kind of chosen the site they want. By Wednesday, hopefully they're gonna have posted their summaries or their descriptions of their sites.
Mhm.
And then
then,
that's what the actual due date for this would be aligned with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When the final deliverable is completed.
Yeah.
So if they do need to, they can kind of like, there's some wiggle room, right? For Monday, maybe Tuesday, they figure out the thing, or maybe even Sunday, the day before the week starts, they do it.
Yeah.
But Wednesday is really when the artifact needs to be done for the later stage. So again, it's like you've done the project management structure.
Yeah.
And it makes sense also with how you've structured it in Canvas.
And right now, those kind of checkpoint moments are suggestions on your
Right.
part. We're hoping in the near future,
That's true.
Canvas is going to introduce checkpoints as a tool in the discussion discussion activity tool, where you can actually build those in and say, there is a due date on Monday and there is a separate due date on Wednesday. And then it'll show up in their to-do list, it'll show up in their calendar, and it'll show up in the grade book. But for now, we don't have that, so these are more like suggested checkpoints, but even that is good support structure, I think.
gets everyone hopefully in the group on the same page.
And then should we look at the
Yeah,
second?
let's look at the next one.
Absolutely.
And so then we've got the next part, which we built as an assignment. Again, we want to be able to show that you can attach groups to discussions and to assignments. And so now in this part, this is when we're asking students to come together. Hopefully through the discussion, they've kind of had a chance to look through each other's different site evaluations, look through some strengths, some risks, kind of ask each other questions. And this can continue here. We've got, by Monday, for example, we'd want them to come to that consensus of which is the location they think is best for building this new structure. And then suggesting that by Wednesday, they should have some sort of outline built, some clear idea of where they're going, and then by Friday, a group presentation built.
And in this example, I think probably this is a little bit of a compressed example to a certain extent, right?
It could be, yeah.
I think if I were to do this in my class, I'd probably expand it to more than just the two activities. I might have a middle assignment where it is an outline or a working paper, so that I have, as the instructor, have a chance to do a quick check-in, make sure they're on the right track, make sure that all members of the groups are participating and pulling their weight and intervening if necessary before getting to the last stage. But depending on the class, the point in the term, the group dynamic, maybe that's not necessary, but this could be as long or as short as you wanted it to be, is I think a key part of this is you can expand these group projects to span multiple weeks and many stages and artifacts along the way if you wanted to.
And maybe one of the things to consider is just as the time frame increases, you have the ability to create a stronger group dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Caleb, Nick, and Melanie have been working for 5 weeks now. I can start really challenging that group dynamic. I can really start challenging how they're interacting, make things a little bit more free form, put a little bit more like ambiguity in maybe some of what I'm asking. But again, that's all within the confines of structure. And the longer that time frame comes out, you do run the risk of creating more like busy work or something that wouldn't be authentic, right?
Yeah.
So there is a balance. You just want to be careful that you are just taking that moment to reflect. Is this actually an authentic part of a group project or group artifact? Is this how I would work with my coworkers? Well, I probably wouldn't have like 7 check-ins, right? We'd probably be meeting at a certain rate that makes sense for the deliverable. So just something to consider.
Yeah.
And I guess one other thing I was just going to say is in this example, we've kind of built it such that this discussion board, that initial discussion board, is sort of a central communication hub for the full 2 pieces of the project. So we start out with that discussion board for, the first due date, but then we've also woven it into this next part. The link is embedded in here so that students can continue to use that as a space to communicate with each other.
Yeah, and I like that because often that's one of the downfalls of discussion assignments is they feel very compartmentalized. You do your post this week, your reply, and then you move on and you never look at it again. In this case, we're using that discussion as more of, like you said, a workspace. And you're explicitly telling them, no, you're not done with that. Go back to it, continue that discussion, come to a conclusion that you didn't reach last week. And then based on that conclusion, you're going to move forward. And I really like that as a way of kind of short circuiting that one and done mentality that discussions often have.
Which might mean that this needs a little bit of coaching, but that's
Mhm.
kind of like when we look at group projects, there's only so much you can put in the text, and there's probably a lot that's kind of unspoken or undesigned in this space where it's like, yeah, Melanie would be going through and double checking those group discussions, and maybe Melanie checks them more at the start of the term than the end because they kind of get into the rhythm of it, but it is a different way of viewing that. So you probably would need, again, what's that support going to look like? Is it you doing a double check, or maybe you meeting with them kind of to start off the first group project so they can get into the flow, or maybe you record hey, this is how these group projects have gone in the past, whether it's, the first time or not, you can kind of fudge that. But the idea is, again, you're giving that structure.
Yeah, I think that's great. We're almost out of time. Any final thoughts that you want to make sure we cover?
I think we covered it.
Okay.
What about you guys?
Maybe the disclaimer of it's really hard to do group projects that are completely asynchronous. And so I know there are some books that we have specifically in here. I think actually Caleb was reading one earlier on online group projects, but it is something that ends up being really iterative. Thank you.
That one right there, high impact practices for online education, has a whole chapter devoted to asynchronous group projects. And we have a copy, well, Jared has a copy up here in the kettle. I don't know if we have one over at the TLC, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is one over there as well.
But either way, yeah, it's just something to really like think critically about, and why you're doing it and what makes sense for you, and kind of really, I guess, reflecting on that before you hit the go button.
All right, I think we're about out of time.
I don't think we'll make Jerry fill out an evaluation.
No, probably don't need to. Next week, we have a special guest joining us, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes, Leslie Dawson from IT.
Yeah, Leslie's going to talk about specifically Office 365 tools that could facilitate group projects for students and for faculty, and go into some of the details of how those work, how students would share collaborative documents with each other, and then how you can talk to your students about those tools that are available to them.
Mhm.
So that should be an interesting one.
Yeah,
Should be fun.
should build off this quite nicely though.
Okay. All right. Thanks for watching, and we will see you all next time.
Bye all.
Hey, real quick, while I got you all three there.
Is this for live consumption, or should I end the stream, Gary?
No, don't, you can close it. We don't need, this isn't for live consumption.
Okay.
All right.